hope you all had a wonderful holiday season. I'm so excited to see you, and today is going to be a music theory lesson. So I'm going to have a little series for you guys so that you can understand where your fingers go on the violin or on the viola, plus understand like how that is related to music theory and learning your intervals and hand patterns and everything. So this is the first video in that series. So what I'd like you to do is just take a screenshot of this. And I'm going to just explain this to you very quickly. So there's kind of a lot of information on here. The first thing that we're going to go over is this. So this up here, oop, I kind of erased some of that, these are all of the notes that exist. Okay, so all of these notes are related to each other in half steps. So if we go from A up to the next possible note, which is A sharp or B flat, they're exactly the same note. They're just different names for the same thing. On the piano you have a white key and you have a black key. So that's what this line is. This would be kind of the black key on the piano. So if we go up one note, it's a half step. If we go up one, it's a half step, half step, half step, half step. So all these notes are just kind of a half step apart from each other. So a half step, just so we know, a half step, also known as a minor second, is the smallest interval that we have in music. As you can see, there's no other note in between a half step. The next possible interval up from A to B flat or A sharp is a half step, and it always sounds like jaws. So for example, if you're playing an A, it's a little easier to think of tuning a half step because you know what that sounds like. It sounds like jaws. So if an A is da, and then you're trying to go up to an A sharp or a B flat, which is kind of like an ambiguous thing to find, I guess. It can be like, how do you know what that's supposed to sound like? But if you're playing an A and then you know that the interval up is a half step, you know it should sound like jaws. Da-dum, da-dum, da-dum. So you mentally kind of you understand what it should sound like, and then with your tuner you can kind of make sure that you've got it all. But it's good as a musician to develop your ears so that you know what it should sound like the next note that you're going to. So, all right, and I've written down here that since it's a half step and it's the smallest interval, it's when you have fingers squished together. So we're gonna be looking at the basic hand pattern today, surprise. And that's when you have 2 and 3 squished together. So there's no space in between them. You can see there's a space between 1 and 2. But 2 and 3 are squished together, and then 3 and 4, there's a space in between them. So a half step is when your fingers are squished super tight together and it sounds like jaws. Okay? So the next interval we have is a whole step or a major second. So if you add a half step and a half step, you get a whole step. So if we go from A to A sharp slash B flat and then go up to B, that's a whole step. That makes a whole step. So from A to B, we have a whole step. B to C, this is kind of a tricky one. This is actually a half step because there's nothing in between them. So we're climbing the staircase, the next thing up is a half step. So if we want a whole step up from B, we have to go up 2 steps, and it's a C sharp or a D flat. Okay? So a whole step or a major second is 1 full step. If you add a half and a half, you get a whole. It's gonna sound like do, re, mi if you're going up, do, re, mi if you're coming down. 3 blind mice. So I've given you a song so that you know whenever I'll show you on our hand pattern where you'll see we have a series of whole steps and then we have a half step. You can see what it should sound like. So I hope that kind of makes sense. And I'll be right back with this erased here. We're gonna keep this, and I'm gonna show you the basic hand pattern. So just sit tight and I'll be right back. Okay, so we're back, and this is what I call our basic hand pattern, okay? So let me just hold this up here, and we're gonna figure out the notes that come up here. So as you can see over here, I've kind of bracketed where the whole steps are. Remember, whole steps are consecutive fingers, but there's a space in between them. So So there's a space from open to 1 and from 1 to 2. So this is going to sound like do, re, mi. If we start on the open string is do, 1 is re, 2 is mi, do, re, mi. And then 2 to 3, second finger to third finger sounds like Jaws. Da dum, da dum, da dum. So we have do, re, mi, da dum, and then we have another whole step, do, re, do, re. So these are all the intervals that we have going on here. Okay, so we're gonna go back to our little list here and figure out what a whole step is. We're gonna go start on the G string, which on the violin is your lowest string. This is your highest string in pitch, this is your lowest string in pitch. Okay, so what is a whole step up from G? Let's find G. So this is a half and this is a half, so it's A. We need another whole step up from A. Here's A. We have a half and a half, so that's to B. Then we have a half step, B to C, right? Next little stair up is a C. We have a whole step up from C, half, half to D. You guys get this? I hope you're kind of understanding. And then, by the way, your fourth finger in first position is the same as the string above. So you have a D here, and you can also play open D. They're exactly the same note. They just have a little bit of a different timbre. So it would be like if I sang a pitch and then someone with a really, like a man, like a big burly man sang the same note as me, we just have a different voice. There's two different voices singing the exact same note. So this is going to be a little bit deeper, and this is going to be a little bit higher. Or just a different timbre is what I'm trying to say. Okay, so a whole step up from D. Here's D, we have a half and a half, which makes a whole. And then from E to F, something, is it an F or is it an F sharp? So we have an E, that's a half step. Another half step up is an F sharp. Why isn't it a G flat? Because we haven't gotten to G yet. So it would be like going from E to G flat and we've missed F. So we're just gonna put an F sharp there, not a G flat. Otherwise we would have missed F. Okay, a half step up from F sharp is G. We want a whole step up from G, half and half, though that's an A, same as your open A. Whole step up from A is B. This one's tricky. B, we have a whole step, so we have a half step and a half step, so it's a C sharp. Half step up from C sharp is D. Whole step up to D is E, same as your open E. And then a whole step up from E, this is a half step, and then a half step, so it's an F sharp. And you can actually see, if that sounds familiar, it's familiar because we did the same thing over here. From E to F sharp, we have a whole step. And from E to F sharp over here, we also have a whole step. So that's why that's familiar. F sharp, a whole step up. F sharp to G is a half step. G to G sharp is a whole step, so that's a G sharp. And then we have an A, and then we have a B. Okay? So this is how we're figuring out where our fingers go. Everything is related to each other in half steps and whole steps. As long as you can play do, re, mi, and you can sing do, re, mi, and you can hear do, re, mi, then you should be good finding your fingers. Make sure your strings are tuned to the right pitch, right? And then if you start by hearing your open string, and then you hear in your head where re is, do, re, you can kind of find where your first finger is, and then you can find where your second finger is, mi, do, re, mi, and jaws, da dum, and then do, re. So you just gotta kind of have a little blueprint in your head of what these should sound like. Finding the interval is a lot easier than just randomly trying to find the note B out of somewhere. You know, B is actually made out of two whole steps. So if you put this little pattern of first finger and second finger down, provided first finger's in the right place and you can feel out your whole steps, then you're gonna find a B. If you just put second finger down randomly somewhere or on a tape, you might find it, but you just kind of don't have a reference point. So that's why I like to work in patterns, because it's just a little bit more reliable, especially when you get into other positions like second position or third position or like a crazy high position. So the next video is going to be dealing with key signatures and the order of the sharps. Probably we're going to do sharps first and then flats, and figuring out how to figure out where your fingers go based on a particular key signature. Okay, so I'll see you soon. Bye.